Last one's going to be Ellison, so if you get him, you can take a look.
Yeah, I know, that's what I figured. Yeah.
Okay, and you're a current member of the Bar Association, so we won't give you the oath today. And do you have any opening comments for us?
As a matter of fact, I do not have any opening comments, sir. I was asked to appear before the committee to answer questions, and that's what I'm here to do.
Okay, we appreciate you being here today. Senator Fulmer, do you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Ellison, for being here. Would you give us a timeline of your history with the Harrisburg Authority? You appear to have gone from solicitor to board member to chair. So could you give a brief
Sure.
history?
I joined my firm in 1997, I believe. Shortly after I became a member of the firm was appointed solicitor to the Harrisburg Authority, and I served as assistant solicitor to Mr. Nate Waters and also to Mr. Bruce Walter. My involvement at that time was just simply to attend meetings that either Mr. Waters or Mr. Walter could not attend. I really didn't have very much involvement in terms of the day-to-day operations of the authority, at least not until 2007. And it was at that point that I was asked to consider becoming a member of the Harrisburg Authority Board to help get the Resource Recovery Facilities retrofit project completed. That was in, I want to say, January or February of 2007, and I was seated as a board member in August of 2007.
When you arrived at the authority, my light wasn't on. Mm-hmm. When you arrived at the authority in 2007, what did you find?
When I first arrived in August of 2007, my earliest recollection was I read an article in the newspaper within a day or so after I was finally seated that the Harrisburg Authority was considering a $50 million plan to complete the retrofit of the Resource Recovery Facility. After finding out about that, I contacted the Harrisburg Authority staff to find out exactly what that plan involved, and to make it clear that I could not, as a new board member, sign off on any plan without becoming familiar with the details and also meeting with all the stakeholders. Essentially, what I found was an operation that was in disarray financially. It had no ability to sustain debt service. The resource recovery facility itself was only operating on one burner. The other two burners were not operational because of the problems with the construction and retrofit process. And that was the main revenue generator for the actual resource recovery side of the Harrisburg Authority's operations. So the first task that I set myself to, as well as the other board members, was finding a way to identify what the issues were with the resource recovery facility and see how those issues matched with the $50 million plan that was on the table at the time, and then to also sit down with the city and the county to find out if there was movement to be had on that plan, either upwards or downwards, so that we can move forward with getting that facility completed.
Okay. Who did you rely upon for advice and counsel? Did anyone share with you concerns in 2007 about existing incinerator debt not being self-liquidating?
I don't recall specific conversations about whether or not the debt was self-liquidating. What I do recall is that the first step, or the first thing that I wanted to look at, was how do we get the retrofit completed in a timely fashion for the least cost? And secondly, assuming that we came up with that plan, how do we go about paying for it? I do recall that there were discussions, and you'll have to bear with me because this was about 5 years ago. I do recall that there were discussions with the city, with the county, and with our own professionals, including bond counsel, the authority solicitor, special counsel that was retained by the authority, that there were various options for us to look at. And the option that made the most sense was rate increases. And we had spoken with representatives of the city and the county about that idea as we were going through that process back in 2007. The working capital portion of the plan that was negotiated was intended to cover debt service for, I believe, the 2008 calendar year, I believe. So looking into 2009, we knew that we were going to have to increase rates for both city customers and for county customers. And I believe that we did have some financial projections that were completed that showed that if we actually achieved the rate increases that were targeted, that we would have been able to address all of the outstanding debt issues.
Now, Carol Contreras just told us that the 2007 borrowing was driven by Mayor Reed, the county commissioners, and 2 Harrisburg Authority members, you and another member. Why did you push this bond so hard?
Well, I wouldn't say that I pushed anything hard. Keep in mind, as I said, when I first arrived at the Harrisburg Authority, there was a $50 million deal already on the table for this project. And our options were essentially only 2 options. To do absolutely nothing, in which case approximately $225 million worth of stranded debt would have been left for the city and the county to handle, or we could go ahead and move forward with the financing for the completion of the facility, and that would have given us the opportunity to, number one, have a facility that was fully operational and that, based upon revenue projections, could be profitable. And number two, that would have given us the opportunity to look at rate increases as a way of covering all outstanding debt. And that seemed to make the most sense at the time, as opposed to sticking the city and the county with $225 million of stranded debt.
Did you have any concerns with moving forward with the 2007 C&D notes?
I'm sorry?
Did you have any concerns with moving forward with the 2007 C&D notes?
Well, after consulting with the various professionals that we had in mind, and also keep in mind that the only professional I believe that we retained from the authority's original team was Carol Contreras. We had brought in Public Financial Management as the new financial advisor. That is a nationally known company with a national reputation. We had also brought in special counsel from Goldberg, Katzman, and Shipman, and we were also consulting with the Harrisburg Authority solicitor. After speaking with all of the professionals, the Harrisburg Authority Board at that time comprised of myself, Mr. Pappenfuss, and Ms. Erica Bryce. We relied upon the advice that was given to us at the time, and we were at that time presented with 2 options. Option number 1 was do nothing and the entire house falls apart, or we could move forward with completion of the retrofit process and look at rate increases as a very viable option to solving the debt issue.
Okay. Your firm, Rhoads, prepared and presented a June 26, 2003 opinion on conflicts of interest for members of the Harrisburg Authority. What did you do to ensure members of the board did not have any conflicts? And just to amplify that, why didn't these guidance apply to you as a board member as you were serving as chair while Rhoads and Sinon was doing the work for the authority?
Well, 2 things. Number 1, I was not involved in the 2003 transaction in any way, shape, or form. Okay. The memo that you speak of, I've never seen because I was not involved in that project. So that's first. Second, when I was originally asked to serve as a member of the Harrisburg Authority by Harrisburg City Council, there was a public hearing process during which I was interviewed. And it was specifically raised by the then president, now current mayor of the city of Harrisburg, Linda Thompson, that it was known to the entire council that Rhoads and Sinon had historically performed legal services for the Harrisburg Authority and continued to do so up through the date of my hearing before council. And the only question that was asked was if there was a conflict between Rhoads and Sinon's ongoing representation of the Harrisburg Authority and my duties as chair, how would I resolve the conflict? And I advised, and this was videotaped publicly or video recorded publicly, I advised that I would speak with the authority solicitor at every step of the way to make sure that there were no conflict of interest issues, and to the extent that there were, I would side with the Harrisburg Authority. And I made that very plain up front.
Okay, thank you. What role did you play in the 2007 C&D notes, and who were you advising?
Well, I wasn't advising anyone. As the chairman, I was the one soliciting advice.
Okay.
And as I said, the professionals that I relied upon at the time were my bond counsel, my special counsel, my solicitor, and my financial advisor. And also keep in mind that we also met with representatives of the county, and the county had its own legal team and its own financial team, and we also met with representatives of the city as well. So there were no decisions that were made in a vacuum by any party independently. This was very much a cooperative process from the outset because that's what I insisted upon.
Bear with me with this next question. In the last hearing that we had, former Mayor Reed told us the special projects fund was under the control and discretion of the authority. Is that true or false?
Let me answer the question this way. When I became chair of the Harrisburg Authority in conjunction with the other new authority board members, the first thing that we did was shut down that special projects fund, okay? I have seen nothing in my review of the Harrisburg Authority documents that existed at the time that led me to conclude that that special projects fund was controlled by anyone other than Mayor Reed. Now, with that being said, the Harrisburg Authority on paper operates as an independent entity, so of course, no disbursements could be made without action by the board. But based upon documents that I've seen, correspondence between the mayor's office and the Harrisburg Authority, anytime the mayor designated that a disbursement be made from that fund, the disbursement was made. And there were occasions where those disbursements were made without a vote of the Harrisburg Authority. So I would have to disagree.
Okay, so just to amplify that so I can better understand it, sir, and I thank you for that answer. What can you tell us about the Special Projects Fund? I mean, did Mayor Reed direct or attempt to direct you or the authority on how to apply the monies in the Special Projects Fund?
Well, to the best of my recollection, and again, keep in mind, this was 5 years ago. To the best of my recollection, by the time the new authority board members took their seat, the Special Projects Fund was either empty or had very little in it. There was no communication between Mayor Reed's office and the new authority board as it pertained to the day-to-day activities of the board. I made it very clear from the outset, once I became chair, that the Harrisburg Authority was operating as an independent entity that had its own board and would govern itself. So there was no reason for Mayor Reed to contact us to provide us with any directives or a wish list of any sort, and he never did. I believe I think I had only 2 meetings with Mayor Reed during the time that I was chair of the Harrisburg Authority. The first meeting was sometime in November, dealing with the working capital and construction plan that we were negotiating with the city and the county. And the second meeting, I believe, was a meeting with Mayor Reed, Commissioner Haste, and Council President Thompson. And again, that was about solving the debt issue. But there was never a time where Mayor Reed even attempted to issue any type of directives to the Harrisburg Authority regarding the Special Projects Fund, which was by that time closed, or any other funds.
Okay, and my last question is this, and I thank you. Why didn't you cooperate with the forensic audit team in sharing information? It says that Rhoads Sinon cooperated by sharing information, but Mr. Ellison as an individual did not. Actually,
2 answers to that question. Number one, I wasn't contacted until very late in the process by counsel for the Harrisburg Authority, who was allegedly heading up that process first. And second, the only documents that I had were copies of old agendas or board meeting minutes, which were well within the control of the Harrisburg Authority. There were no other documents that I had outside of that grouping or that classification.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Fulmer. Chairman Blake.
Thank you, Attorney Ellison. I appreciate your being here and your time. Again, Senator Fulmer covered a lot of ground I would have otherwise touched on with you, but I guess when you arrived in 07, you had a lot of catch-up. How mature was the deal by the time you got there? How much time did you have between your arrival as chair and the actual vote to go forward with the 07 financing?
There was I would say there was an artificial stimulus, so to speak, that forced the parties to reach some type of deal quickly. It's a matter of record that the Harrisburg Authority had missed several debt payments that year, and I believe that the city of Harrisburg had covered some of those debt payments. The city was essentially out of money, and any future debt service payments that the Harrisburg Authority missed, which the city couldn't cover on its guarantee, fell to Dauphin County to make. To the best of my recollection, I became chair in September. The next debt service payment was upcoming in either November or December, and the Harrisburg Authority had no way to make that payment. So it became incumbent upon us to work out a deal on the working capital and construction loan, which would include monies to cover debt service. So I would say I had about 6 to 7 weeks to get myself familiar with the issues, assemble a team that would be able to competently help us navigate those waters and finalize a deal. And that deal had to be negotiated with the county and the city. And that final deal was a result of numerous meetings, including public meetings before Harrisburg City Council, public meetings with the Harrisburg Authority, and several working meetings with representatives of the Harrisburg Authority, Harrisburg City Council, the Dauphin County Commissioners, and Covanta. So it was a very work-intensive process, a very fact-intensive process. There were some bumps along the way, and at the end of the day, we negotiated a deal which is the personification of political compromise, because no one was really happy with what we came up with at the end. Everybody had to give something for us to get that deal across the finish line. But eventually, I believe we got it completed around Thanksgiving.
Understood. Thank you. A lot of the testimony we've got up to now, Attorney Ellison, kind of mirrors some of your own testimony, meaning that we arrived in 2003 and a decision had to be made to whether we close the house down or whether we take another shot at finishing an unfinished project. And then in 2003, it was, do we close the house down or do we take a shot at completing an unfinished project? And the same thing occurred, I think, upon your arrival in 2007. I think your own statement is, what was the option?
That's true. That's true.
So I guess what I'm asking you is, in retrospect, as you look at this, how do you feel about the risk that was taken by the taxpayers, and in particular as it relates to the decisions that were made under your own watch? You did have a dissenting board member who testified in our previous hearing here. Did some of those dissenting comments, do you recall how that affected your final decision-making process?
I'm not sure which board member previously testified, and I'm not sure of the substance of their testimony. What I will say is that between myself and Mrs. Bryce, I do know that Mr. Pappenfuss, at the end of the process, decided that he was not in favor of us going forward with the plan, so I'm assuming that's the board member that you're talking about. But myself and Mrs. Bryce, after meeting with the professional team that we put together to advise us, as well as meeting with the city and the county, felt that that was the best option on the table for us. It was either do nothing and literally let the entire house fall in on itself, or find a way to get the project completed so that we could get revenues coming in, and then look to rate increases to close the gap. Because at the end of the day, the Harrisburg Authority, as far as I'm concerned, is like any other business. If you have a problem meeting your debt service or meeting other expenses, then you have to look at increasing the cost of the product in order to cover that gap, and also cutting expenses where you can. And that's exactly what we tried to do. With respect to the city, we went to the city, went to Harrisburg City Council, advised that we needed a rate increase, gave them the number, the dollar value of that rate increase, and the city, knowing exactly what it was that we were up against, gave us that rate increase. When we went to the county for the same reason, we found ourselves embroiled in litigation for about a year. And ultimately, we were not able to get that rate increase. And as a result, the debt service picture of the Harrisburg Authority became much more fuzzier and much cloudier than it should have been.
Understood. And we did, and that is consistent with prior testimony of Attorney Kucheris. The issue of the covenant that ran with the bonds, expecting a certain amount of rates to be paid to the authority, and then losing in court, henceforth not realizing the benefit of those increased rates later on. I guess I don't have any more questions, and maybe just ask you if you have any recommendations from your experience with the authority to this commission, to this board. I'm sorry, to this committee. There's a history here of individual professionals being very capable and professional within their own scope, their own purview. There was an interface with DCED on behalf of the authority that, some might say that DCED stretched their interpretation of this as a continuing one project, going all the way back to 1998 and even before that. We're trying to understand whether or not there is legislative or regulatory controls that we can consider that would mitigate the kind of risk on the taxpayers that this set of financing deals imposed, both at the county, at the city level. I'm wondering if you have any comment on what we might want to consider.
Senator, I'm really not sure that I can answer that question for this reason. When I came on board in 2007, I really didn't study the prior transaction and what went wrong or what worked with that transaction. I really only focused on the problem that was at hand, which was how do we get this ball across the goal line? How do we get this project finished? So I didn't have a lot of history about who the various actors were up until that point and what their activities were in connection with the project. I can just tell you that I thought that my team did everything that we could to get the project completed and to solve the debt service issue. And I don't think that my team really could have done a better job than what they did, given the mess that they inherited. And I don't think that anyone would dispute that it was an absolute mess, at least when I walked in August 2007.
Understood. Thank you, Attorney Ellison. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ellison, getting back to the Rhoads and Sinon legal opinion on the voting matter, did you have any knowledge of that? I know you were a practicing attorney in that firm.
I never saw that opinion. As I indicated, when the Harrisburg Authority, or when Rhoads and Sinon became solicitor to the Harrisburg Authority, I was the assistant solicitor, but honestly, I only attended meetings that Mr. Walter or Mr. Waters did not attend. I did not draft opinions. I did not review opinions. The opinion of which you speak to this day, I have not seen, so I couldn't offer any specific testimony to it.
Okay, that's disappointing. I was anxious to hear what you had to say about that. So when you arrived in '07, if you see our chart over here, it shows how the cash flow would have been over the years. It's kind of surprising to me that, and I'm not saying it's illegal, but it appears it's something that needs addressed, that we can continue to say this project is self-liquidating, knowing the history of it never cash flowing and moving ahead, spending more money, borrowing more money. When you were making decisions at that point, that 2007 bond, most of the money wasn't being used for the project itself. It was paying off other fees, working capital, that kind of thing.
That's true. I believe $30 million of that money went to working capital, which included repayment of disbursements that were made by the city and the county. Those were negotiated as a part of that deal. And I can state for the record that the Harrisburg Authority tried very hard to negotiate those items out, because the city and the county, as guarantors of the project, agreed to incur certain risks, and those risks did not break in their favor. And so it was not my opinion at the time that the Harrisburg Authority should be borrowing money to reimburse those entities for their losses. But that was the only way for us to get a deal done. As I said, at the end of the day, no one was happy with the deal that was done, because everyone had to give up something. And in some cases, I think that the Harrisburg Authority probably gave up a little more than what it wanted to. It is a matter of record that during the time that we were negotiating this deal, the Harrisburg Authority actually went into a technical default. I believe it was sometime in November 2007, because that deal had not been finalized because we were not happy with the terms and conditions that were being insisted upon by the county. And so we pushed back very hard and basically announced to the county that we would go into a technical default if necessary to avoid additional financial burdens being placed upon us. And it was after that process that we finally got to a deal that all the parties could actually live with.
Were you primarily relying on the guarantee of the city at that point or of the county?
The county, the city's guarantee at that particular point in time was very weak, and all parties knew that. The city pretty much told us that they didn't have the money to make the next debt service payment, so that meant that it was the county's guarantee that was really going to keep that ship afloat, and that gave the county tremendous bargaining power.
How much did you rely on all the professionals, your team, as you put it, to make your decisions? And how much did the authority in general rely on the professionals?
I relied very heavily on my team. Ms. Kacheris, for instance, has a long-standing reputation as an attorney dealing in municipal financial matters. And I've known of her professional reputation my entire career, so I relied upon her. I also relied upon PFM. As I said at the time when I came in, the authority's current financial advisor, I believe, was Mr. Bruce Barnes, and he was operating just as a solo professional on his own. But I felt that we needed to bring in a much bigger company with more resources, and so I brought in PFM, relied very heavily upon them. Our special counsel, Goldberg, Katzman, and Shipman, specifically Royce Morris, he was very instrumental in help us negotiate most of the major points of the deal, and I relied very heavily upon him. So I would say that I did as a responsible board member was supposed to do, and that was put people in place that you think are good people who can do the job, listen to the advice that they give you, and execute. And that's what we did.
So they were driving the train more than the authority's own thought process. I mean, it was...
No. I would say this. As I testified earlier, there were 4 parties to this process. There was the Harrisburg Authority, the county, the city, and even Covanta had a say in this. All of those parties made the joint decision to proceed in the direction that they did. So no, I wouldn't put it on the professionals of any one entity. All the parties, all the stakeholders made a common decision to go in one direction, and that's what we did.
Okay, how about one more question on the Special Projects Fund?
Sure.
With either hat, either your chairman's hat or your attorney-at-law hat,
Sure.
do you know of any statutory authority to establish that fund in the first place?
Let me answer the question this way. I don't know of any, and when I first took my seat with the Harrisburg Authority Board, there were a lot of questions about the legality of that fund and the history of the disbursements from that fund. And looking into it and looking at some of the documents pertaining to some of those transactions, a lot of those transactions, it was my opinion that there was some type of fraud at play there. And we did contact law enforcement, and we actually got an investigation started with the FBI. We referred the matter to the Justice Department as well as to the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office was not interested, but we did meet with representatives of the FBI because I thought that from what I found, there was definitely some activity at play that I didn't think passed the smell test, either legally or professionally. So for my part, that was a decision that was made, and that was done fairly quickly.
Senator Fulmer.
Yeah, I just have one follow-up question. A previous testifier said the county was the hero in all this. Would you agree? A
process like this only works if All the parties are working and cooperating in good faith. And there were times during the process that it was questionable as to whether all parties were operating in good faith or just simply operating from their own interest to protect. And certainly the county felt that it had to make sure that it protected the interest of its residents. City council felt that it needed to protect the interest of city residents. And frankly, all of those folks were customers of the Harrisburg Authority, so we felt that we had the same interest. I'm not sure that anyone looking back on this process can claim to have worn the white hat or to be a hero. So I'm not going to sit here today and tell you that I agree with the proposition that the county was the hero in this process.
Okay, thank you for that answer, sir.
Thinking about one more question, and it pertains to the self-liquidating debt. It was your understanding, I guess, at the time that the new borrowing was self-liquidating, and you were comfortable with that?
I don't recall if my understanding was the debt was self-liquidating per se, or if we had made a determination that we were going to deal with the debt by raising rates to cover the debt. That's really the best way that I can answer that question.
Okay. I didn't have anything else. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you
Thank you.
for making the trip in.